What's the plan here?
We're thinking about bringing you home.
Sam Elliott's father told him he had a snowball's chance in hell of making it. He was 18 when his father died. He slept in his car. He shoveled cement. He turned down casting couch offers and watched doors close in his face. But there was one woman who saw something in him before anyone else did. She pushed him toward the role that changed everything. At 81, he finally admitted what she meant to him. And the truth about their 41-year marriage is more surprising than the movies they made together. Sam Elliott entered the world on August 9, 1944, in a small hospital in Sacramento, and everything around him felt simple and grounded. His mother had the grace of a champion diver from Texas, and his father carried the rough confidence of a man who worked as a predator control specialist. Their family roots stretched back to El Paso, and stories from that side of the family often reached all the way to the Battle of San Jacinto. So Sam grew up inside a mix of athletic discipline, old Texas grit, and long shadows cast by history. Those early years in Sacramento shaped him quietly. The hospital served working families, and that setting made his beginning feel even more real. He grew up watching his mother teach, and his father move through the outdoors like it was his second home. And through those small moments, he learned the toughness and calm that would later sit so comfortably in his voice and posture. When he turned 13, his family moved north to Portland. And that shift opened a new chapter. Portland's forests, cold rivers, and wide open spaces gave Sam all the room he needed to feel close to his father. They hunted together. They fished together. They talked only when needed because the quiet between them said enough. His father's job kept him away many days, but whenever he returned, he brought practical lessons and a deep respect for the land. Those long mornings in the woods and those slow afternoons near the water shaped Sam's sense of who he was. They gave him the calm steadiness that later made him look like he had always belonged in a saddle or next to a campfire. That move to Portland settled something inside him and pointed him toward a life he didn't yet understand. Still, he carried a weight even as a boy, because the man he admired most didn't think his dream was worth chasing. When Sam said he wanted to act, his father told him he had a snowball's chance in hell of making it. The words hit hard. They stuck with him. But Sam had already fallen in love with acting at 9 when he watched westerns and felt something shift in his chest. Even with the doubt that hung over them, he didn't step back. He kept imagining a life on screen. That dream carried him forward, even when tension filled their home. And when his father died at 54, leaving Sam only 18, the grief twisted everything. Sam wished they had more time. He wished his father had believed in him, even once. Later, he would say that his father's honesty and work ethic shaped him more than the doubt ever did. That mix of pain and fire became part of him, pushing him every time he stepped in front of a camera. As Sam moved through his teenage years in Northeast Portland, he finished high school in 1962 and tried college the way most people do when they are unsure of their next step. He studied English and psychology at the University of Oregon but dropped out after 2 terms. Then he switched to Clark College in Vancouver and found his way onto a stage. When he played Big Jewel in Guys and Dolls, something inside him clicked. The local paper noticed him and said he had what it took to become a professional actor. That praise stayed with him like a small spark. It made him believe he wasn't dreaming blindly. Yet, all the excitement still collided with his father's disapproval, and that tension followed him every time he made a choice. After his father's death, life forced him into harder work. He took construction jobs. He shoveled gravel. He mixed cement. He worked until his hands carried the kind of toughness that never really fades. And as he carried boards and swung hammers, he built the physical presence that later made him look so convincing as every cowboy and drifter he played. Those jobs were grueling, but they gave him discipline and patience, and he held on to both when Hollywood felt impossible. In 1965, the draft hovered over him. Vietnam was pulling in so many young men, and Sam expected to be among them. Recruiters approached him, but he ended up joining the California Air National Guard instead. His mother begged him not to go to war, and he listened, even though the choice left him with guilt that stayed deep inside him for years. He always felt a strange heaviness knowing others went while he stayed behind, and that feeling shaped the way he treated veterans later in his life. By 1966, he knew he couldn't ignore the pull toward acting anymore. He moved to Los Angeles with almost nothing and carried his father's warning in the back of his mind. In LA, he worked the same kind of jobs he had back home. He shoveled dirt. He drove nails. He slept in his car when rent couldn't be covered. And with every paycheck, he paid for acting classes. He reminded himself to stay grounded, even if it meant doing whatever work came his way. His early months in LA were hard, but he never turned around. Then things began to shift. He landed a small guest role on The Virginian in 1966. It was brief, but it got him on a set. Then he appeared in Lancer in early 1969 as Renslow. More small parts followed in 1970 and 1971. His characters barely spoke, and sometimes they didn't even have names. But he kept showing up, and people noticed his calm strength. Those early Western roles gave him confidence and a path forward. In 1969, he stepped onto the set of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. His role was tiny, card player number 2 in a small bar scene next to Robert Redford. He joked that he was nothing more than a shadow on a wall. But the film was huge, and that appearance planted his name inside Hollywood's big circle. Catherine Ross was in the film too. He was too nervous to talk to her then, but years later, she would become his wife. The early 1970s brought their own ugly side of Hollywood. Sam faced casting couch propositions from both men and women, the kind of situations actors whispered about, but rarely admitted. He turned every one of them down. That choice came with consequences. Some doors closed. Some casting directors never called him again. But he kept his integrity intact and told himself he wouldn't trade his dignity for a shortcut. Then 1976 arrived with something different. He was cast as Rick Carlson in Lifeguard, and for the first time, he carried a film in a way that let audiences see the full version of him. The movie came out on July 23, 1976, and people noticed his steady charm, the low voice, the relaxed strength. Critics praised him. That performance gave him a new kind of momentum. It opened doors that had been stuck halfway for years, and it showed everyone what Sam Elliott had been quietly building inside himself since the day he first watched those old Western films as a boy. Then, 1979 arrived with a shift he had been waiting for. He stepped into the role of Tel Sackett in The Sacketts, and for the first time, he felt the weight of a real part settle into his hands. Filming took him to New Mexico, where the heat rose past 100 degrees and the days stretched long over dusty sets that reminded him of home. He rode horses for hours, sometimes through sandstorms that made the equipment stall out, but he never complained because it felt like the life he had always imagined. The story followed 3 brothers after the Civil War, and his character Tel had spent nearly 10 years apart from his family. Elliott carried that loneliness in his posture and let the land shape the way he moved. People noticed. The series became a hit, and for the first time Hollywood saw him as more than a face in the background. But the attention came with a new problem. His deep voice and rugged look made him an easy pick for westerns, and that pulled him into a trap he didn't expect. He kept hearing the same thing, that studios wanted someone more marketable for the lead roles. He would show up for an audition only to learn the part had already been handed to someone younger or cleaner looking. It hurt more than the early rejections, because by then he knew he could carry a role. He tried avoiding projects that felt too close to the cowboy mold, thinking it would keep him from being trapped. Yet turning those jobs down only narrowed his chances. Even so, he stayed honest about the frustration, and people began respecting him for speaking up. It helped him slowly build a place as a character actor who didn't bend for the sake of an image. Around this time, he made a choice that shaped everything that came next. He let his mustache grow until it became the signature look people later associated with him. Executives kept urging him to shave it because they wanted a softer image. But he refused. He didn't want to be polished down into something easy. The mustache needed months to reach its full shape, and every time he shaved for a role, he had to start again. It became a quiet statement of who he was, and soon it helped him land the parts that matched his rugged honesty. As his career moved forward, he began working with people who shared the same love for Western grit, including a few collaborations that drew comparisons to Clint Eastwood. Their styles matched in a simple way. Neither needed many words. Both carried a natural toughness. But Elliott stayed cautious. He still turned down several roles outside the Western genre because he feared being stuck forever in one type of story. This caution slowed his climb, but made his presence stronger in the long run. Because of it, when he walked into a scene, people believed the life behind his eyes. A turning point came with The Big Town in 1986. He played Phil Carpenter, a seasoned gambler in 1957 Chicago, and though he wasn't the lead, he brought a grounded sense of experience to every moment. Matt Dillon was the star, and the studio even set aside $600 for Dillon to learn craps in real casinos. Yet audiences kept remembering Elliott's performance. The film made $1.7 million in the United States, and critics pointed out how Elliott's voice and quiet strength made his character feel real even with limited screen time. A year later, he stepped into Fatal Beauty opposite Whoopi Goldberg. This time he played Mike Marshak, a security chief who started as an enemy and slowly shifted into an ally. The movie blended action and humor, and Elliott surprised people with how naturally he handled the comedic beats. Their chemistry gave the story more warmth, and critics noticed how he carried emotional weight without losing his tough edge. Even though he voiced Thunderbolt Ross in the 2003 Hulk film, his connection to Marvel characters stretched back to the 1980s. His voice was so memorable that it became the sound people associated with authority and intensity. It even led to more voice roles later, including the caretaker in Ghost Rider. His work shaped the sound of military figures in animation as well as live action. His dedication to method acting sometimes created friction. Elliott didn't like actors who showed off their commitment with dramatic gestures. He had no patience for people who arrived with photographers or made themselves bleed for effect. He clashed with a few well-known names, including Val Kilmer, Kevin Costner, and Jared Leto, because he felt their theatrics got in the way of the work. To him, acting needed subtlety and sincerity, and he was never shy about saying so. Then came Roadhouse in 1989, a role that gave him one of his most memorable characters. As Wade Garrett, he played the mentor to Patrick Swayze's Dalton. The character was steady and worn and full of heart, and his death in the story drove the final act. Elliott filmed the entire movie while hiding a knee injury because he refused to let it slow him down. The injury didn't show in his performance. Instead, it added to the quiet weight he carried, and the film became a cult classic that still holds its place because of characters like his. He even turned down several superhero roles during the 1980s because he felt they didn't match his voice or presence. He wanted roles that stayed truthful to who he was, and caped characters didn't feel right to him. Later, when he did play roles in Marvel films, it was only because the parts allowed him to remain grounded and real. By the 1990s, he became a cult icon through films like Tombstone and The Quick and the Dead. In Tombstone, he played Virgil Earp, and his own mustache added authenticity that fans loved. People still talk about the mustache twitch he gave during a scene near the famous line, "I am your Huckleberry." In The Quick and the Dead, he stepped into a mysterious gunslinger role and faced Gene Hackman in a showdown filmed in pouring rain. He used period-accurate gun handling and did his own stunts, giving the movie a raw sense of tension. His cameo in The Big Lebowski in 1998 pushed him even further into cult territory. As the stranger, he drifted into the story with slow narration and a calm presence that felt almost surreal. His lines stuck in people's minds and turned into quotes passed around for years. His voice in that film became so recognizable that fans would imitate it just for fun. He even voiced Trusty in Disney's Lady and the Tramp in 1997, though he rarely took animated roles. Live action always mattered more to him because it matched the kind of grit he lived for. That choice revealed how much authenticity meant to him, even when other actors chased bigger paychecks. One last moment showed his commitment better than most. He turned down the villain role in Con Air because he thought the character was too exaggerated, and he didn't want to play someone who felt cartoonish. He chose depth over spectacle, and John Malkovich eventually took the part. Sam Elliott stepped into We Were Soldiers in 2002 with a calm weight that came from the real man he was playing. Sergeant Major Basil Plumley had lived through 3 wars before the cameras ever rolled. He was born in 1920 in West Virginia, enlisted in 1942, and spent 32 years in uniform. He hit the beaches of Salerno and Normandy and survived Operation Market Garden in 1944, where he earned a Purple Heart. Later, he fought in Korea with the 187th Airborne Infantry Regiment, and in Vietnam, he served as the Sergeant Major of the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment during the Battle of Ia Drang in November 1965. That battle became the first major clash between the United States and North Vietnamese forces, and it was the place where his tough voice and cold stare became legend. When the film shows him shouting battle orders that shake the ground, those moments come from things the real Plumley actually said. Even the line about the weather was taken from his own mouth. By the time he retired in 1974 as a command sergeant major and lived quietly until 2012, he had become a myth among soldiers. And Elliott carried that memory on screen as if he had known him all his life. A year later, in 2003, Elliott stepped into another world entirely when he played General Thunderbolt Ross in Hulk. This time, he wasn't channeling a real soldier, but a comic book one who had been chasing Bruce Banner since the early Marvel days. In the original stories, Ross had guarded a gamma bomb project at a remote base in the 1970s and saw Banner as both a threat and an opportunity. The film follows that idea closely. Ross spends every moment trying to track down the Hulk, driven by obsession and old anger. Elliott's voice and rough edges matched the character's history in the comics so well that fans wanted him to continue the role, even after William Hurt replaced him in later films. In the comics, Ross eventually becomes the Red Hulk, but in this film, his journey stays grounded in fear, control, and regret. Elliott let all of that sit behind his eyes, giving Ross more pain than the script even asked for. In 2005, he turned that same presence into something quieter and far more tragic in Thank You for Smoking. He played Lorne Lutch, the original Marlboro Man, now dying of cancer and trying to warn others about the dangers of the cigarettes he once promoted. The story mirrors real events from the 1980s, when the tobacco industry began facing public backlash. Lutch was partly inspired by David McLean, a real Marlboro Man who died in 1995 after decades of smoking. Elliott's character brings that truth through in a single meeting, where a tobacco lobbyist tries to pay him off. The tension between Elliott's fading cowboy image and the industry that once used that image made the scene feel painfully real. Even behind the satire, his performance held a quiet shame that stayed with viewers long after the credits rolled. Then, time moved forward, and Hollywood finally turned to look at him properly. In 2019, after 5 decades in the industry, he received his first Oscar nomination for A Star is Born. He was 74. He played Bobby Maine, the older brother of Bradley Cooper's character, a man who carried old wounds and old love in the same breath. His scenes were few, but they hit hard. The film earned 8 Academy Award nominations, and Elliott walked away with awards from the National Board of Review, along with Critics' Choice and SAG nominations. Reviewers everywhere said it was about time he was recognized. Elliott laughed and said he was winning the war of attrition, and in a way, he was right. He had simply outlasted everyone. 2 years earlier, in 2017, he had already shown something far deeper in The Hero. He played Lee Hayden, an aging Western star facing a diagnosis that pushed him toward the end of everything he once was. The story moved slowly through his fear, his silence, and his attempts to reconnect with people he had drifted from. In one haunting scene, he coughs up blood while riding toward the horizon, knowing that both the sunset and his life are slipping away. That moment stayed with audiences because it felt honest. Elliott carried the whole film with a tired grace that made viewers feel every regret the character tried to hide. His performance earned him honors at the Newport Beach Film Festival and reminded people who he had always been. Even in small roles, he brought something unforgettable. In Top Gun: Maverick in 2022, he appeared for only a moment, playing a bartender who tells a simple story about last times and long stories. Most of the speech wasn't even scripted. The director let him improvise, and Elliott shaped a quiet monologue that landed with surprising weight. In a film filled with jets and noise, that little scene carved out a soft place and stole attention without trying. In animation, he did the same thing. In 2015, he voiced Butch, the T-Rex rancher in The Good Dinosaur.
You ain't scared of a croc biting you on the face, you ain't alive.
The character spoke with a calm toughness that felt like it came straight from a dusty western. Lines like, "If you ain't scared, you ain't alive," became favorites among fans and reviewers. Elliott said he liked the idea of a dinosaur who sounded like a seasoned ranch hand, and he recorded his dialogue with a mix of humor and grit that gave Butch a warmth that surprised even the filmmakers. Then came 1883 in 2021, where he played Shay Brennan, a Pinkerton agent guiding families across the Oregon Trail. He was 77 and still doing many of his own stunts. The days were long, the heat was sharp, and the horses were unforgiving. He took bruises, strained muscles, and pushed through weather that made younger actors stumble. The pain worked its way into the character. Shay carried grief for a family he had lost, and Elliott let that sorrow drip into every look and every breath. When the finale came and Shay kept his promise to reach the Pacific before choosing his fate, fans felt the weight of every mile he had traveled. His performance stood at the center of the series and left a mark that carried into the larger Yellowstone world. But behind the roles and the work that shaped him, there was a part of his life that rarely reached the public. His daughter, Cleo Rose Elliott, grew up in a home filled with fame and pressure, and the early years were not as peaceful as they seemed. Court records say that by the time she was 12 or 13, the arguments between her and her mother, Catherine Ross, had already turned harsh. Over time, the tension grew sharper. Words became threats. Threats became frightening moments that friends noticed but didn't always understand. Those early years set the stage for something far more alarming. On March 2, 2011, everything reached a breaking point inside the family's Malibu home. Cleo was 26. The argument moved fast. Ross said her daughter threatened to kill her, kicked a cabinet door, and followed her from room to room. When Ross tried calling the police, Cleo cut the phone line. Then she attacked her with scissors, stabbing her several times in the arm. The wounds broke the skin through her shirt and left marks that stayed visible long after. Ross filed for a restraining order within the week, describing each moment in painful detail. The story shocked the public, but for the family, it was the result of years of buried conflict finally tearing open. A restraining order was issued on March 8, 2011, requiring Cleo to stay 100 yards away from her mother's home, car, and workplace. Police had to escort her to collect her belongings. Then something unexpected happened. When the court date arrived on March 30th, neither Cleo nor Ross appeared, and the judge dismissed the order. The legal part ended quickly, but the emotional part did not. Their relationship remained fragile well into the next decade, with quiet attempts at healing mixed with long stretches of distance. Cleo kept working in music and modeling while the family tried to mend something that had been wounded for years. Through all of this, Sam Elliott stayed steady and quiet. He never spoke publicly about the attack or the restraining order. He chose to stand close without adding noise. That silence wasn't avoidance. It was a way of protecting his family from more attention than they could handle. Over time, there were glimpses of peace. A shared meal here, a family sighting there. Nothing dramatic, nothing explained, just slow steps toward something gentler. Elliott let the healing happen privately, away from cameras and headlines. And long before all of this turmoil, long before the fame that came later, there was a quiet moment in 1969 when Elliott first saw Catherine Ross on the set of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He was an extra. She had already won an Oscar for The Graduate. He noticed her but stayed silent. Their paths split and didn't cross again until 1978 on the set of The Legacy. By then, he had grown into the man he wanted to be and finally told her how he had felt all those years. They spent months apart after filming, writing letters across the ocean until the silence between them filled with something warm and sure. That long-held crush slowly turned into something lasting. Ross had gone through 4 marriages before meeting him. Elliott had gone through none. Their wedding finally came on May 1, 1984, in Malibu. James Garner officiated. The ceremony was small and soft, filled with people who mattered, and nothing more. The next year, their daughter Cleo was born, and the three of them built a life that moved between film sets and quiet spaces far from the spotlight. Even with their deep bond, tabloids tried to twist their story. Rumors spread about trouble, but both always pushed back. In 2024, when Elliott was 81, he said in an interview that Ross was his partner, his home, his everything. He remembered moments when she pushed him toward opportunities he might have missed, like when she encouraged him during their honeymoon to audition for Mask in 1984. Over time, people came to see that their strength came from patience and trust, and the decision to stay through storms instead of running. They even shared the screen in The Shadow Riders in 1982, playing characters caught in the middle of a Civil War story. Their chemistry slipped through their performances in ways audiences could feel. It strengthened their bond both on and off the set, and left fans with a film that still holds up decades later. Now, after more than 41 years together, Elliott speaks of Ross with the same softness he carried in those old letters. He still calls her the love of his life. Their marriage has survived fame, rumors, parenthood, heartache, and the long shadows that life can cast. And somehow, through every role and every storm, he kept choosing her. Their story moves the way his voice does, slow and steady, holding more truth than most people ever see.